listening to Westchester Talk Radio, produced by Shark Creative and made possible by our friends over at Entergy Indian Point Energy Center. You're listening to Isolation Therapy. This is episode 2 with Larry Gottlieb from Robert Martin Company, Bio1 Managing Director. Larry comes from, a long list of just wonderful accolades, both the Harvard Business School, he went to Yale. He's done, they refer to him as the human Swiss Army knife. We could talk a little bit about that, as he's done so many different things for the Westchester community. We go way back, Larry and I. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention your days with Entergy and Burson Marsteller. And my goodness, I thank you so much for all of the work that we've done together through the years. And with everything going on right now, Larry, I just thought, why not reach out to you? I would love it for our listeners to get your perspective on, first of all, and just how you're doing in isolation, and tell us a little bit about Robert Martin Company and what efforts you're putting in there, and how that relates, or what can you draw to your experience there, to what's going on in this day and age.
That is a loaded question with many parts.
Yes.
So we'll try and unpack that a bit. Well, thank you. Look, we've known each other for many, many years, and it's always about staying connected with smart people, with good people, and regardless of any change in where you've been, we've always stayed connected and always appreciated.
I don't know if you just called me smart or not, but I know that's why I'm connected to you, but go ahead.
Well, it's the shark motif is very, maybe that's smart,
All right, good. There we go.
But we'll transfer that to you as well. But, so that's a key thing, is staying connected to people. And I think that's become, in many respects, a lost art because of the electronics, the digital community that we live in. And so if there's anything good to come out of this crisis, maybe it's a realization that human connection, if you notice, it's not that texting has exploded during this crisis. It's Zoom and Skype and other ways and other platforms that people can use to actually look face to face and get on camera and try and stay connected to folks, because we've been told you have to stay at least 6 feet or 12 feet away from each other. And so there's clearly a need for people to stay connected. So I think that overall is a good point. Most of my career, now going 30 plus years, which is amazing, too much has been spent on and dealing with crisis communications, crisis strategy, and trying to kind of get through a crisis and then recover from a crisis. And this is, has a lot of similarities to 9/11 in that people weren't really prepared for it. It just kind of happened. And so the similarities to me are quite interesting, especially in the New York City area, where people are just going about their lives. It's a beautiful day. And the next thing you know, people running around in masks and wearing gloves, and there's, the numbers of people dying and people catching it, and trying to come up with testing and ventilators and all these kind of scary things. In 9/11, again, the terrorist attack here, Washington, D.C., and people are trying to figure out, who's the enemy. And here, the enemy was kind of clearly defined, but mysterious enough in terms of trying to figure out how do we deal with it. And 9/11 in a similar way. Is a terrorist attack? Is this a one-off? Is it a nation that's declared war on us, and trying to figure out, and heroes rise, as they say, from the ashes, and people really prove their mettle, as they say. Here, it's certainly, everybody in the healthcare industry, pharma, you have individuals that are making equipment, people that are collecting masks. I think it shows the American spirit in terms of coming together, which is a wonderful thing. But when you go deeper to the core of it, that's where people are having the most difficulty, which is the isolation, trying to conduct business. If you've never worked remotely, This has certainly been an interesting
Yeah,
experience.
you've got to adapt, right? And I'll tell you, you hit on something there, with people connecting, and now they're connecting virtually. Before this, I can count on one hand how many times I had a Zoom call, and it's all I've been doing. And I'm grateful that it's there. And you really do feel connected to people. I mean, it'll never, and I've been saying this over and over, it's not going to replace the warm embrace when we're in a room together. But I'll tell you what, you're in my office. I'm in your office right now.
Right,
and
right.
and we are getting connected. I certainly, get that sense when I'm speaking with people, and the gatherings of sorts, whether it's with your childhood friends, or maybe your college friends, or your family. The other night I did a little virtual meeting with my Little League team, and we had a virtual catch. So a lot of these things are coming out. A lot of the silver lining is you get creative and you try to stay connected, and hopefully, it will carry people through. Because the flip side is certainly isolation is going to impact people in a negative way as well, right? So they've got to do positive things and stay in touch. And you're right at the top of the list when it comes to being creative and bringing people together. And tell us a little bit about Robert Martin Company and Bio One. What's going on there?
Well, before you go to that, I just want to say, the fascinating thing to me, and I just as a hobby or a quirk of mine, in terms of trying to study the psychology or kind of go deep into the background of what's happening anytime a crisis hits, or situation we're in now, is we've been in training for this for years. People just don't realize it. Meaning, we've been taking selfies of ourselves. We've been performing in social media. We've been doing Facebook Live. So, you think about how crazy it is that the folks that we used to think were wasting time on Xbox Live or Fortnite, online, communicating with each other, working as teams, was preparing folks for what's happening now. And that to me is the most, is so interesting, is that we never thought that that's what we were preparing for,
Right.
was that people who never did this would have to figure out, how do I use my laptop, and how do I use the camera in the laptop. So I just want to make that note before we move on.
No, it's a good point.
In terms of, Robert Martin is been around for over 60 years, a real estate management and development firm, most of that work done in Westchester County, but has investments in other parts of the country. And I've known the Robert Martin folks for many, many years. Tim Jones, Greg Berger, fantastic individuals, and knew both founders, and met both founders, but knew one of them particularly well, Bob Weinberg. Brilliant individuals, and really created the modern office park in Westchester County. And having the opportunity to come work for them and with them was was quite humbling to be asked to come work for them, and really develop something new, which was to look at the life sciences as a budding industry in Westchester County. And kind of, we talk about our previous experiences. And as you remember, I worked for County Executive Astorino back when he started his administration, his run, and came in as head of economic development for Westchester County, and was one of the original folks to say, we should be taking the life sciences industry far more seriously than we had been at that point in the county. And I know some folks had looked at that, but never kind of formally organized it in any way. And we created the Biohud Valley, New York Biohud Valley moniker, and branded it, and really started bringing those companies together, and worked with the Regenerons, the Accorda Therapeutics, and others. And so the work I'm doing now is really about taking that to the next level, which is working with startup companies that are moving out of what are known as incubator spaces throughout the New York City region, and moving them into what we call graduation space, the next stage of their development, and really making those investments and building out lab space. And even with COVID-19 crisis, trying to move past that
Mm-hmm.
and looking to the future, say, okay, how can we build out kind of this work lab space that would make these companies, not only the ones that are here, want to grow into their own space, but also companies in the same situation from the New York City tri-state area, companies that feel that Westchester County would be a better home for them because that graduation space fits in
Right.
like interlocking pieces into a bigger business ecosystem.
And you might very well see a lot more of that, as we move forward. And as fortunate as we are, I mean, think about, like you mentioned, Regeneron and Accorda Therapeutics being right here in Westchester County. That's it's something to be said to have those companies right there, and everything else that's coming from that. So exciting stuff on the horizon. Let's hope that, as far as what's going on right now with this pandemic, that we get to the peak sooner than later, and we can find out exactly. We talk about Regeneron. I mean, Regeneron's working real hard on, I would imagine, some vaccines and what have you, among other things. I know they're working around the clock. There's a lot of people way smarter than I don't want to say you and I, but certainly me.
No, they are. They are.
I have faith. They're getting there. I mean, look, they've come so far already in a week, right? In terms of the test that needs to be taken. I mean, it doesn't need to take days. It could take 15 minutes, soon to be 5 minutes. I think eventually, might even be where, you go to CVS, you buy something, you take a test, and you can walk into a meeting and know whether you're positive or not. Maybe that's the direction that we're going to be going in.
Yeah. I think, the interesting thing, the part to me is, again, you have your kind of initial crisis, and then how does that morph? How does that change over time? And if you look specifically at this situation, it's interesting how people's ideas about government, about looking at big pharma, looking at big government, it may change minds about both. You had people that were, very against the growth of large pharmaceutical companies and the power that they have, quote unquote, over healthcare. And then you look on the government side, people were very afraid of, big government and overreach. And in a way, there's positives and negatives of both, but there's a mixture of both and benefits to both. So you have the ability for large pharmaceutical companies like Regeneron have the intellectual capital, they have the equipment, they have the resources, they have the relationships, they have the networks to academia, they have all of that they're bringing to bear as quickly as possible to find both a treatment and prevention, potentially inoculation against future outbreaks. And then you have big government, which people say, big government's terrible, and you could argue politically either side about that. But the reality is that you need a mechanism bigger than all of us individually to muster all those resources that individuals can't get. I can't build a hospital. I can't, so localities, individual states may not be able to get millions of masks or get ventilators built, but the federal government can do that. So it's going to be interesting out of that to see people's attitudes, how much they change about personal privacy, about using telemedicine, about big pharma, about the federal government and how much taxes you pay or don't pay, and how big a government should be or how small it should be. So it's going to be interesting, as with any crisis. What are the outcomes that change attitudes and that change business?
Without a doubt, business will be, businesses will transform. We talk about creativity and innovation and how that comes out as a result. So we try to look for all the silver linings as best we can. And, that's really the part of the inspiration behind even having these discussions. Larry, before we go, just on a personal note, how's everything at home for you? Everybody healthy, I trust, and you guys, your family getting through everything?
No, thank you. Everybody's fine. You have the issues of just the kind of isolation that folks have, the bunkering down, trying to find spaces within your house so everybody can work. I have, my younger daughter is trying to finish a semester out college online. I have my older daughter who was, living on her own down in the city. She came back to bunker down with us, and she's working every day remotely. I'm working remotely. My wife's working remotely. And I also have, my mother-in-law lives with us, is 91. And so we have to make sure she's isolated, but not alone. So,
right.
So that's a tricky combination. So we're seeing that, but I know people that had birth of a baby at this time. I know somebody, has lost, people who lost loved ones that can't appropriately say goodbye or maybe even potentially bury the individual. It's a mess. I lost my dad a few months ago, and thinking about what it would have been like if I couldn't really say goodbye to him in the way I wanted to and be there for him is a terrible thought. My younger daughter was born the week before 9/11. I was home on leave for a few days with the baby when 9/11 hit, and that changed the next 7 years when I was working at Entergy. And that was just incredible. So everybody's got their stories.
Mm-hmm.
As you'll find out as you interview more folks, everybody has their stories, but it really gives you a great appreciation at every crisis who's dealing with it directly. And you've got the healthcare folks, but also in terms of greater appreciation, the folks that are stocking shelves, the folks that are, delivering products.
Yeah, they're all on the front. They're all on the front line right now. Amazing. I mean, really, every single person that's doing all of those things, they're really, they're putting themselves at risk to help others. And I tell you, it warms your heart to see how hard people are working out there, knowing that they could end up getting it. Look, you might get it, and it might just be a couple of days of inconvenience for you, but it could also be, if it gets the hooks in you, it could be devastating. So you really are putting yourself on the line.
It's like Andrew, I describe it's like a cruise ship. Most people take a cruise. You're on the top decks of the cruise ship, so you're worried about the restaurants and the bars and am I getting enough sun? How's the music going? And all those decks below you are the individuals that if they're not doing their job, you're not enjoying yourself. You're not being able to enjoy your cruise. And so what you're seeing is kind of a cutaway of a cruise ship. And you're seeing that, yeah, I've been enjoying this part and I'm trying to enjoy my vacation, do what I need to do up here. But if the folks down in the engine room and all those layers aren't doing their job, then those things aren't going to happen. That's what's really being exposed here, is all the layers of that, of that ship. And I think I've always had a great appreciation anytime I've gone on vacation. Just the way my dad always told me is, whether somebody's sweeping streets or the CEO, you treat everybody the same. So that's part of my DNA. I've always been that way. But my hope is out of this is that people do have a greater appreciation.
Maybe more people will feel
everyone, like everybody.
If we have more Larry Gottliebs in this world, we'd be better off. So hopefully.
Oh Lord, I hope Regeneron's not cloning or doing anything like that. You don't want that.
Hopefully some of that rubs off. Well, listen, Larry, look, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. I really enjoy our time together. And Larry Gottlieb, Robert Martin Company, Bio1 Managing Director. It's a pleasure speaking with you. You're listening to Westchester Talk Radio, produced by Shark Creative, made possible by Entergy Indian Point Energy Center, and also a host of others like White Plains Hospital, Lapolis Electric, High Tower Advisors, and Park Sterling Realty. We'll be back with more isolation therapy. Stay tuned.